Okay, so today there's kind of two basic things going on here. One, I want to look at the next test. I want to review it briefly so you have an idea of what's happening on the test coming up in a couple of weeks, and you can start getting your study guides ready for that. I mean, you guys had an 82 average as a class, so I'm not worried about anybody here. You guys seem to know what's going on, but still, I want to look at it. So, A, let's look at the test. I'm going to review that briefly. B, let's get into some definitions with morphology. And then C, I need to lay some groundwork for parts of speech. And today we'll focus on two, nouns and also verbs. We'll focus on how to identify nouns and verbs by both what we call affixation, or the endings attaching to these words, or by syntax, which means where they occur in the sentence. So these are the things we have going on right now. Here it is. Okay, so the next step, let me go to, okay, I'm going to share my screen right here. This is a video within a video, or we're looking at a video that I did during the summer about test one for phonetics, phonology, and morphology. Okay, here we go. And nothing happened. Okay, here it is. Test one review, phonetics, phonology, and morphology. Your attendance, your participation each time we meet is paramount to helping you do really well in this course. Of course, to get ready for this first test, there's a few things that you want to know so you can be fully prepared. Exactly. Yes. All right. The first three questions, they have to do with definitions of phonetics. So when I did this review, right? So I split the screen with the Camtasia screen capture program, and I centered the video on me. But guess what was on the other screen? The Canvas test. So I see the test as I'm talking to you. So there's 27 questions. It's 450 points or something. Some questions are worth only 10 points. Other questions are worth 40. I'm going to go down 1 through 27 right now so you have a general idea of what these questions are all about. Phonology and morphology. Each question is worth 10 points. Question 4, you need to understand the difference between allophones and phonemes. This is a multiple choice 15-point question. Remember, allophones are non-distinctive variations of phonemes, and then phonemes are meaningfully distinct sounds. Question 5, this is short answer, kind of like a short essay. You need to understand what inflectional and derivational morphemes are, give some examples, and then show how they attach to words. Yes, you haven't seen this in my course yet. I do have some short answer. Beware of short answer, free response answers. You can't just BS your way through that stuff. Either you know what inflectional morphemes are, either you can give examples of them, or you can't. There's no way to BS around that. You got to know that. So I even told you what the topic was. So I'll ask you something like, it'll say, what are inflectional morphemes? What are derivational morphemes? Give examples of those to illustrate your answer, something like that. This will be short answer. It's 25 points. Question 6 is multiple choice. You need to understand these definitions: phones, phonemes, allophones, and allomorphs. In particular, you need to know what an allomorph is and how that can be represented in an example. That's question 6. That's worth 10 points. So I think that we said the other day, right? We said that the ed ending, right? You guys remember this? It can be pronounced as a T. It can be pronounced as a D. It can be pronounced as an id. So maybe you have looked. I looked out the window yesterday, or I grabbed a pencil, or the professor provided a study guide for the students. So these here, These are three different phonetic representations of what we call the inflectional past tense ending. But even though they're different in their phonetic representation or their pronunciation, it's still the same ed ending. So we say that these are allomorphs. So the ed is a morpheme, and the D and the ID, or the little capital ID, these are considered allomorphs of the same morpheme. So here's what you want to remember. What an allophone is to a phoneme, an allomorph is to a morpheme. You can think of it like that. So if you know what allophones and phonemes are, then it'll be pretty easy for you to understand what allomorphs and morphemes are. And we will talk about this, but you don't need to know exactly what I'm talking about here. But one other thing, you remember how we said that the S ending, it, when you have an S at the end of a word, right? Let's say you're looking at the plural S ending, right? Like books. So books you have with an S, you have pencils with more of a Z, and then you take a word like piece or pieces, which is also a noun, but it has is here, like this. So we're going to say that these three here are all allomorphs, in this case, of the plural S inflectional morpheme. The S can be pronounced three different ways, but it doesn't alter the basic identity of what this morpheme is. It's giving information about the plural S. No matter how you pronounce it, it's still the plural S ending. So those are two, not just one, but two examples of allomorphs in English. Okay, let's keep going. And remember that this is just giving you kind of an overview, and we'll get into more detail with these topics. Okay, let's keep going. Question 7. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, I hit that. Here we go. It is paramount to helping you do really well in this course. Of course, to get ready for this first
We're back
test,
to the beginning again.
No. Allomorphs, in particular, you need to know what an allomorph is and how that can be represented in an example. That's question 6. That's worth 10 points. Question 7 and 8, these both focus on what we call free and bound morphemes. They're multiple choice questions, 10 points apiece. Now we get into the fun part. We have phonetics, right? So this shows you that you haven't completely broken loose from phonetics, but after this test, we can kind of put that in the rear view mirror for the most part. The good news is, I know the IPA will cost you points. It costs everybody points to some extent, and except for the two people here that got 205 out of 205, they're not worried about it. But a lot of the points on the test will be more with morphology and not as many points with phonetics. So I don't know if that'll make you feel a little bit better, but that's the truth. I'll have a word written in the IPA. It'll say this is written as, and you have a blank. You have to type the response into the blank there. This is kind of like short answers. That's question 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Each of those questions are between 10 and 15 points. Now question 14, 15, 16, 17, these are all 15 points apiece. I'll give you a word like electricity. I'll say electricity is transcribed phonetically as, and then write the phonetic version of that word. Now, like I did with the quiz, you will not need any special symbols to do your transcriptions on the test. I'm going to keep it simple. So the only thing you will need is your keyboard. That's it. That's all you're going to need is the keyboard you have on your computer to do the IPA. So it'll be really simple. Okay, let's take a look at question 19. It's a 10-point multiple choice question. This is looking at how the pronunciation, sometimes words end in S or Z. For example, you might have excuse versus excuse. And the pronunciation of those words can affect the lexical category of those words. And that's what you need to understand in question 19. And the point I'm trying to make here is if you have a word like, let's say, or, right? So if you see these two words here, I have abuse. I have abuse. I'll have a column. I'll have a column of words that end in Z. I'll have another column of words that end in S. I'll say, what can we conclude about these words? So what you want to say is abuse, excuse, use. All of those words are nouns. So the words that end in Z are actually nouns. No, I'm getting it wrong. I'm getting it backward. No. Abuse, excuse, and use, these are verbs, and then abuse, excuse, those words are actually nouns. So what I'm trying to show you is even the pronunciation of words phonetically can affect the part of speech of those words. That's a point I'm trying to make there. You'll see something like that. Okay, let's keep going. Question 20, question 21, question 22. These three questions are worth a lot of points, around between 10 and 40 points. You have to take a word. Do you hear that? So some of these questions are worth 40 points apiece. Some of them morphology questions. Morphology kind of looks at, Taylor, morphology looks at, you have a word and you try to break it into smaller parts. These smaller parts maybe have either meaning or grammatical function. So if a word has many multiple parts to it and you have to break it into those multiple parts, that question's worth more points. If the question involves a word that has only one part, for example, the word door, you can't break down door into anything other than door. That's the root. It's a free morpheme. We're done with it. The only thing you can do is break it into individual sounds, but that's no longer morphology. That's strictly phonetics. Morphology looks at the units, the smaller units of a word that have either meaning or grammatical function. Now, if I gave you a word like dehumidifier, now that can be broken into many small parts, maybe 4 smaller parts. That could be a 40-point question because it has multiple parts to the word. So the more parts there are in the word, the more points I will give you to that. It'll give you the specific instructions. It'll say the following word contains several morphemes. 1, divide the word into its component morphemes using the plus symbol. Number 2, state which morpheme is the root. And then for each affix, state whether it's inflectional or derivational. If it's derivational, note how it changes a part of speech or meaning of the word. If it's inflectional, note the grammatical information it adds to the word. So you'll see 3 questions there. This is a pretty big one. And then you have, and what I was just talking about is called isolating morphemes. Now, the good thing is the instructions that you see in the workbook about isolating morphemes, I copy and paste those instructions. I copied that and directly pasted it into the test. So the instructions are exactly the same from the workbook to the test. So you'll know exactly what I'm trying to get you to do when you take that test. And then you have question 23, question 24, question 25. Okay, so you have those 23, 24, and 25. These are word diagrams. It'll say draw a diagram for the following word. I'll even give you an example of how I want you to do it. And these are pretty big. These are like 30 to 40 point questions. There you go. So I have confidence in you guys. If you can get an 82 average on the first quiz, the average on this thing is probably going to be 90. I would not be surprised. So how about this? Let me show you something just quickly here. Where is it? Okay, there it is. I forgot about how to find my whiteboard. Here. Okay, so let's say that you have a word like dehumidifier. That's a big one, right? That would be about as hard as I'll ever give you in this course. I'm not gonna give you something like, anti-disestablishmentarianism and have you break that into all its smaller parts. But with dehumidifier, right, here's what you would have to do with a word diagram. So you'd have to do something like this. That would be your first step. If you can break it into smaller parts like that, this is you have 10, 20, 30, 40. The next step, and we're going to practice this too, but I'm just giving you an overview right now. You have humid is an adjective. Now I could maybe say dehumid, or I can say humidify, but dehumid I don't think it's even a word. I don't know how to use that. Dehumid, forget it. So I'm going to go to humidify, which is a verb. Now, at this point, I could either say dehumidify or I can say humidifier. It doesn't really matter how you do the diagram. You can do it either way, right? So I'm going to say dehumidify, which is also a verb, and then dehumidifier. I got to get this out of the way, which is a noun. So now we have 10, 20, 30, 40. So that's a 40-point question. If you don't draw any diagram at all, and remember that I did it very easily here, but you have to be able to do this diagram using the forward and the backslash marks on your keyboard. Just doing this, it'll take you 15 minutes. I'm not kidding you. And I'll give you a lot of time because I know that. I know the way that we're doing the test online is a little bit tricky. And I don't want people doing JPEG and uploading this. It just gets way too complicated. But you have to use the keyboard to show the relationship. But this is what I mean by a word diagram, something like that. And believe it or not, a lot of people find the word diagrams much easier than the IPA. They really do. It's easier to work with. You're working now with parts of a word, and that's easier than just individual sounds. Okay, let's keep going. Very big. So word diagrams. You need to know how to do that. Remember that you separate the word. For example, you take the word reconstruction. So you would say re plus construct plus ION, and then you start with construct, which is a verb. You go to construction, which is a noun, and then reconstruction, which is also a noun. So the word diagrams, you will need to know how to do that on this test. Question 26, it's another question about derivational or inflectional affixes, right? I guess in this case, I'm trying to show you how sometimes the affix can make the word change from, in this case, maybe a noun thing to a noun person. Think about that. Question 27, it's looking at the affixes. Again, in this case, inflectional type affixes. You need to know the grammatical information it's adding to the word. And that's it. So those are the most important things that you need to know for this first test on phonetics, phonology, and morphology. Now, if you want, you can kind of compare that to the study guide at the end of the workbook. The study guide is usually a little bit bigger and broader than what you have to know for the quiz. It's a little bit, or the test. It's a little bit bigger than that. But what you just saw there was exactly the different types of questions and things that you're going to have to do. That's it. This is exact in that 5-minute video there. Okay, so that gives you an idea, right? So the next step is, and this is one of my longer, I don't typically have super long classes, but today, I'm not going to lie to you, we're probably going to be here about 3:30. This is a little bit longer today. I know it's kind of very tedious stuff here, but okay, let me go over to the workbook now. Okay, let's get into definitions. Let's look at some basic definitions of morphology first, right? Okay, get ready. Just quickly, if somebody can help me out, I'm going to ask a few questions here and just unmute and say your piece, and there you go. So morphology is the study of the constructions of words out of morphemes, but what good does that do? We have to go back and get this now. It's the smallest linguistic unit that has either meaning or grammatical function. This is the definition of a morpheme. Now, observe the following words along with their suggested number of morphemes. So, can you divide each word into its component morphemes? So, satisfy has one part. So, we're just going to say satisfy and we're done. Dissatisfy has two parts. So, what are the two parts to that word?
Dis and satisfied.
Dissatisfied has three parts. What are the three parts to that?
Dissatisfied, satis, and then fight.
So you'd have to separate it like this. We'd have to say that, and then we'll say this, and then we'll say that. So you have the ed, you have the root, and then you have the prefix right there. Okay, let's move on. Observe the following two groups of morphemes. We have group A and we have group B. Now, when you answer this question, what I do, you guys probably are, you know my tricks by now, right? So if I make a statement here and then I give two examples here, I'm asking you how these two examples relate to this definition that I just gave you here. So here's a definition. The smallest linguistic unit that has either meaning or grammatical function. That's what it is. So then my question is group A here, right there. So we have re, we have book, we have un, we have miss. We can see these. These are all considered morphemes. So group A, do these connect more to meaning or do they connect more to grammatical function?
Grammatical function.
Nope.
Wouldn't it be meaning? Because
yes, keep going. Tell me why.
the way I see it, it's because when you just have write, you're just writing it. But when you have to rewrite it, you have to do it all over again.
Good. And then book inherently as a free morpheme has meaning. Un means not, and miss means not or negative, right? So happy.
Each morpheme needs to have its individual meaning. If you put un with any word, it's like you undoing, unhappy.
And it
no matter what you put un with,
changes
it
the
changes
meaning
the
of that.
meaning.
That's right. And that's why these are connected to meaning. Now,
So it's basically linguistic division.
Correct. Now, the next thing, we can get rid of this. Okay. Let's take a look at group B. We already know what this is. We have the ing, we have the er, we have the ed, we have the est. All of these things relate to what we call grammatical function, right? Now, we will identify what they actually are. We're going to look at all the inflectional morphemes in the English language. And guess what? There's only 8 of them. So here, we're going to say that the ing has a progressive or continuous function. We're going to say that the er, right, grammatically, when we use it, it's called the comparative. We're comparing something. We have, if we have the ed, right, we're going to call this the simple past. It could be the past participle. We'll talk about that. Now, does anybody have any idea what the est is called? What is its purpose? And how is it different from the er? You guys ever heard of this word? Superlative? Right? So if you have the ER or the EST, which one is used to compare two items only?
Would it be the ER?
That's right. And then the EST typically is 3 or more.
Yeah.
If I said Susan is the tallest of all the students in the class, or I say Susan is taller than Mary, I'm not going to say Susan is tallest than Mary. I'm going to say Susan is taller than Mary because it's just two things. So what I just showed you here is I'm showing you how the ing, the er, the ed, the est, all these things have a grammatical purpose. They really don't affect the meaning. If you say it's big or bigger, it's still big. If I say tall, taller, or tallest, it's still tall. There's really no change in meaning there. If you say swim, I swim in the ocean, or I am swimming in the ocean, and you use what's called present progressive verb tense, you're still swimming. We haven't really changed the meaning of the sentence. If you said, I run in the mornings before class, or I ran yesterday, and you change it to ran, which is past, it's still run. There's really no change in meaning with what we see in Group B. There is a definite change in meaning with the morphemes in Group A. So keep that in mind. But those are really the basic questions that we look at, is if it is a morpheme, how does that morpheme affect the word it attaches to? Does it change the meaning of the word in any way, or does it change the grammatical function of that word in some way? These are questions that we will look at and try to figure out. Okay, free morphemes, very easy. Morphemes that can stand alone as words. So which group represents free morphemes? Group A or Group B?
Okay.
That's
Group
it.
A.
Yep. Car, picture, long, keep, figure, and sky. These are all free morphemes. So how are the morphemes in Group A different from those in Group B? The morphemes in Group A can stand alone as words. In Group B, they cannot. They must be attached to another morpheme. So Group B, we refer to these as bound morphemes. They must be connected to another morpheme.
Quick question.
Yes.
Wouldn't able be considered a free morpheme, or why not?
Yes, it can if you use it as a able-bodied citizen or something. Yeah, I didn't think about that. It could be both. Yeah.
Or breakable, bendable.
Well, if you look at breakable, I would look at it more as a bound morpheme attaching to the verb break. But if you say I am able to fix that flat tire, I'm now using that more as a free morpheme. So I guess you could look at it as both. Wow, good observation. Okay, let's keep going. Content morphemes, morphemes that carry a semantic content as opposed to performing a grammatical function. So I'm not going to have a lot of time here. So any type of morpheme that has meaning, right? So we could say as in rewrite. We could say book, which is a free morpheme that also has the content there. We could even say dis, as in dissatisfied. So all three of these are considered content morphemes because they carry meaning. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. Function morphemes, morphemes that provide information about the grammatical relationship of words. We can just go back here. Where is it? Right here. So we can say that these are all function morphemes. Right there. These are all considered function morphemes. Going back to that definition, so usually with function morphemes, or we can look at them as being inflectional morphemes, things outside of the word control that word. So what do I mean by that? Notice how I said Susan exercises at the rec What is the name of that building anyway? When I'm doing my COVID screening, I know I have to put where I've been. Do I call it the rec center? Is there an official name for it? Does anybody know? I don't even know what that is. Okay, watch this. You guys see the ES here? So we have that. This is called the third person present singular inflection as Susan exercises at the rec center every morning. Notice how if I get rid of Susan and I say the students, notice how that subject affects this word. So we no longer use the S there. We say the students exercise at the rec center every morning. So usually with bound morphemes or inflectional morphemes, things outside of the word itself have an effect on how that word is created or what happens to that word. Okay, let's go back. So we have this bound morphemes. If we go back, bound morphemes that always attach to other morphemes, never existing as words themselves. Can you give 3 examples? I mean, this is a bound morpheme here. This is a free morpheme here. This is a bound morpheme right there. You could say that all of these are examples of bound morphemes that you see in group B, and then all of these are examples of free morphemes in group A there. Okay, some more definitions. Easy things, prefixes, you've probably heard about that. Suffixes, you've heard about that. An affix is simply a name for either a prefix, an infix, believe it or not in English, but there are languages. How crazy is this? I mean, they put the affix in the middle of the word. How does that work? Wow. Prefixes, infixes, and suffixes are 3 types of affixes. So affixes is just a general term for any kind of something that attaches to a word, either the beginning or the end of the word in English, and then in other languages, maybe even what they call infixation. Okay, I think that's good enough there. I'm not going to get into the definitions of derivational morphemes too much. We're going to talk about that on another day. Okay, let's do parts of speech now. Okay, we can do this. Let's get into, okay, lexical categories. All right, so to kind of to create the framework for this, I mean, I didn't even originally, when I started teaching linguistics years ago, I didn't even think about including a section on parts of speech. I was assuming everybody already knows what nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs are, but my assumption was wrong, and it continues to be wrong. So I'm going to focus a little bit on 2 words today, nouns and then verbs, and then next time we will focus on the more difficult ones, adjectives, adjective versus adverbs. And half the time, I don't even use them correctly when I'm speaking. That's how confusing these things are. I mean, they can be tough. We don't even, when we're speaking informally, we don't follow all the rules with the parts of speech. Okay, so it says here, I want you to pay attention to a couple of things here. I know that you're saying, well, a noun is a person, place, or thing, but in linguistics, we have to go beyond that. We have to do more than that. So when we identify parts of speech, we have to think about the morphological and the syntactic frames. So what morphemes are commonly used with the word, and then what is the position in which the word occurs in a sentence? So if we know that there's common endings, for example, an S, if you put S on the ends of many words, it makes them nouns. It's a noun. Like you have book and then books. So you see the S on the end of it, well, Michael, it could be a verb. It's possible because we have the third person S ending, but that's a clue. It's a clue. It gives you some indication of what that part of speech is. Now, so that's the first thing I wanted to say there. Now, the second thing is we can separate, when we talk about parts of speech, we can break them into 2 categories. Content words on the one hand, we have nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs. On the other hand, we have function words, things like determiners, prepositions, and auxiliary verbs. These are the different kinds of parts of speech we will focus on. Now, there's things like interjections and other kinds of things that we have, but I'm not going to get into all those. I'm going to just focus on seven different kinds of parts of speech, right? So let's take a look at content words first. It says words which carry meaning and which receive prominent stress. Nicole, can you do me a favor? Can you hear me? Can you unmute for just a quick second?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. Can you read? I just want you to read the bolded words only, not the unbolded ones, and just go down 1, 2, 3, 4, just reading the bolded words. Go ahead.
Observe bolded words each sentence. She went store. John called Lisa. Telephone. 7. Ashley, go. Friend's house.
Good. Now, Nicole, I want you to do the same thing, but this time only read the function words in each sentence, starting with the. Go ahead.
The, in, to the, on the, at, will, to her.
Now, you see how there's a dramatic difference in meaning if you're reading these words, the content words versus the function words. Function words carry really little or no meaning at all. They don't do really much in terms of meaning. So that's my first point is that the nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs, these are the big important words which carry the meaning. Now, when you're teaching ESL like I am, what you just did, Nicole, I actually have a student right now who talks like that. He'll say, you know, I went store yesterday. He won't say to, he won't say the. So he speaks what I call telegraphic speech. And that's an indicator that his English proficiency is lower because he pretty much leaves out most of the function words when he speaks. He's what I call high beginner or low intermediate level speaker of English right now, right? You can imagine when I was learning Spanish for the first time, I mean, you got all of these different inflectional endings with yo versus tu versus usted versus nosotros versus ustedes. And then what is this vosotros all about? You got all that stuff. So in the beginning, I would just say something like yo camin. I would say yo caminar tienda, right? I would not always say, you know, camino a la tienda. I didn't put everything together initially. I was struggling to just get the meaning, but that's what we do initially when we learn a language. Can you imagine a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old trying to communicate? They get so upset. They know what they want, exactly what they want, but they can't talk. They don't have syntax. So they just take 1 or 2 words, they speak them out, and then you're supposed to figure it out. And it can be a big problem. You got to learn how to communicate with children when they're very, very limited in their English skills, right? And they could be non-native speakers, adults that are very limited. And I had this guy one time, he told me he came into our program at Cal State, right? He tested into level 1. He was telling me in Spanish, he goes, Michael, I'm a lawyer in Argentina. I'm powerful. I know everybody. I'm in charge. I come here. I get a test. I'm level 1. I'm nobody. He was frustrated. But I go, yeah, you got to start somewhere. And remember that with adults, you do not ever, when you teach ESL, do not treat adults like children. Forget about it. They will excoriate you in their evaluations. They are adults who have none or limited English skills. We want to help them improve their English, but you have to respect who they are as an adults and treat them like adults, right? So you don't just give them children's books to read every day. You gotta really respect them and treat them like they are. Okay, so let's move on. So we have this out of the way. So let's look at nouns. A noun names a person, place, or thing, right? You can just look around your room right now. Everything you see is a noun, right? You probably see your door handle, window, blinds, walls, carpet, electric cord, computer, screen, keyboard, table, desk, and on it goes, right? These are all nouns. These are nouns. Okay, morphological frame. A very easy way to identify a noun. Can you make it plural? If the answer is yes, it's a noun, right? What about happiness, Michael? That's a noun. You can't say happiness is. Well, you have abstract nouns and uncount nouns, right? You don't say many homeworks. You say homework, not homeworks. But yeah, you kind of get my drift. Is you can put s on a lot of words, and if it can take the s ending, it could very well be a noun. That would be one really useful tip that you could think about. Nouns can take the following suffixes. This is where it really freaks me out. There's a lot of endings that attach to words that make them nouns. You ever heard of the word democracy? How about neighborhood? How about relationship? How about Tesla Roadster? Right? So, how about this? Wreckage or breakage, right? Signage, even. So, if you put AG or any of these endings, it's very possible that those words can be nouns. Now, if you're like me, you're probably, I don't think it's reasonable to memorize these. I don't expect you to memorize these things. The main thing is if you can see a word and identify it as a noun any way you can, you're fine, right? You don't have to remember everything I'm saying here. I'm just saying that it's important to know what nouns are and how to identify them. Okay, so there you go on that. I'm not going to dwell on this. This stresses me out too much. Let's move on. Okay, how about syntactic frame? This is another test. A minute ago, I said you could put S on it and it might be a noun. How about this? You can put the before it. If you can say the and the word after that seems to fit, the book, the door, the window. So determiners often precede nouns. How about determiner, adjective, and then a noun? The big plane. So we have car as a noun and plane as a noun. That's another test you can think about. Nouns can occur in the following positions within a sentence. Nouns can be subjects, as in the doctor came immediately. Nouns can also be complements. Complements come after the linking verb or the be verb. For example, my mother is a doctor. So we can say that mother is a noun for two reasons, maybe three. We could say mother and we could say mothers. So we can make it plural, which means it's a noun. We can put a determiner in front of it, which makes it a noun. And it functions in a subject position, which also makes it a noun. You guys see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things I can do when I look at words that helps me understand what they are and why they function the way they do. Now, in addition to being subjects, complements, nouns can also be objects. And we have different kinds of objects. You don't need to know these specifically, not even when we get to syntax. Just know that they're objects. So we saw what or who? The doctor. The nurse gave who? The file. To who? The doctor. So we're saying that doctor, if you want to get specific, it is a direct object. We're going to say that file or the file, this is what we call a direct object. And then the doctor is actually an object of a preposition because it comes after the word to. So in the next sentence, we have the nurse, we have stood, we have a preposition, and then we have another object. This is an object of a preposition. So nouns can be subjects, they can be complements, and they can be objects. And there you go. So those are different ways that we can identify nouns linguistically. So think about what types of endings will attach to that word, and then where does it occur in a sentence, and how does it connect with other words in the sentence? And this gives you some clues. Number two, this is the last thing I'll talk about today. Verbs. A word that expresses action, condition, or state of being. I say state of being because that's more of the be verb. If I say we are in this class right now, that's more of a state of being. If I say you completed the homework, you completed your test with high marks, I'm using completed as a verb there. So basically anything that comes after a subject and expresses the action of the subject is a verb. you know, and on and on and on it goes. Eat, leave, swim, talk. These are all verbs. Now let's take a look at endings. So are there any types of endings, what we call morphological or inflectional type endings that mark verbs? And you can say that there is. How about the ed? Right? If you put ed on the end of it, you can make it's probably a verb, right? What about cut, Michael? You don't say I cutted my toe yesterday. I say cut my, well, you got irregular verbs that are in the twilight zone and they don't even have an ed, forgetting all that, right? Regular verbs take ed, we can say that, right? How about this? What if you can put the s on the end of it, as in the student walks to the PE building every morning? So we have the s there that agrees in number with a singular subject. So that also makes this word a verb. We could even say talking. I am talking to you right now. So we put ing on the end of a verb to express what's called a progressive or continuous action. So these are three more clues: ed, s, and ing. Now, unlike this nightmare, look at that. Good grief, hijo de la. Forget it. Get away from it. Verbs aren't so bad. There's not tons and tons of endings that attach to them. We have ate, en. How about to strengthen your writing? You should, blah, blah, blah. You have ing, ed, er. You have ify, ize, right? So you might say supersize my meal or something. But don't ever do that. Believe me, that's a disaster. You don't want to eat too much of that McDonald's stuff. It'll kill you. Okay, so that's it. So pretty easy. So let's talk about the syntactic frame of verbs, right? So believe it or not, a verb can consist, it can occur in the very beginning of the sentence. For example, the word study. This is called an imperative. You put the verb first, it creates a command. It's a very, very strong tone. And I can't see everybody in the class right now, but any guys in the class, let me see if I see anybody in here. Yeah, there's a few in here. Okay. Yeah, the guys, be careful about being too direct. Don't use a lot of imperatives in long-term relationships or you're going to be in the doghouse. What is the doghouse? Go to YouTube and you can watch videos of guys that say things that get him into the doghouse. And that just shows you that there's extreme differences of how men and women communicate in long-term relationships. And one of them is that men tend to be a little too direct. Maybe I shouldn't say too. Men tend to be more direct when they speak, and women tend to be, I say tend to, doesn't mean always, but women tend to be a little less direct. And the imperative sentence, when I said to my wife, you know, empty the dishwasher in a text message, and there I was in the doghouse, and she indeed got angered with the way I structured that sentence. She did not like it. Here's another one. Did you walk into the room? Notice how you have a verb first. It's called a helping verb. Then you have the subject, and then you have the main verb here. And this is kind of what we call interrogative or a question. Notice how in a general declarative sentence, right, we have the subject and then we have the verb right after it. You'll see that a lot. So verbs in many cases can come directly after the subject. And then we have this one. This is a weird one. Notice how we have the subject is at the end. On the shelf is his book. We could have said his book is on the shelf. So it doesn't always mean that the verb comes after the subject. In this case, the verb is coming after a prepositional phrase. So what I do, here's my test. If I'm not sure what the subject is, here's an easy test for you. You can change this to are, and guess what I have to change? Books, not shelves. So I say on the shelf are his books, or on the shelf is his book. So the subject verb agreement rule, it helps me kind of understand, okay, where is my subject? If it's not in the beginning of the sentence, where the heck is it? Right? So if you mess around with a verb a little bit, that'll give you clues as to what's going on in other parts of the sentence. And I think That's it. Good. That's a wrap. I don't want to do anything more than that.